Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're going to be looking at part 2 of our look at Rule the Waves. Originally I recorded this all as one big recording, ended up being about 48-50 minutes long. I thought that was a little bit too long for a single video, so I did break it up, although you may hear bits and pieces where it kind of sounds like I'm talking like this is all still part of the first video, so just sort of a heads up there. But what we're going to be doing in this video is jumping into ship design and kind of showing how the mechanism is deep, yet actually fairly simple to grasp, and does a lot of hand-holding along the way as far as any problems with your design. So with that said, and without any further ado, let's jump back in and take a look at us designing our first ship as the Empire of Japan. Okay, so when you hit Design Ship, you're presented with a new screen that has a whole bunch of options and could easily appear very menacing. So let's go ahead and look through this, option by option, because it's honestly not that complicated. I haven't played this game too much, but I can tell you that I'm someone who's a bit of a nerd, if you haven't been able to tell already, and I actually used to play around with a program called Spring Sharp, which was sort of a fast and loose ship design program where you could kind of throw in different displacements and build your own hypothetical ships, and this is very similar to that. First of all, you've got an option to choose a ship type. So BB and BC right now are not something we can build. Those are dreadnoughts as the BB, and BC are battle cruisers, but those are not something that we have the technology developed for. A single B warship is just basically a pre-dreadnought battleship. CA stands for cruiser armored, basically heavy cruisers. CL stands for light cruisers, which in this era are really just protected cruisers. AMCs are kind of armed merchant ships. DDs are destroyers. MSs are minesweepers. I'm not clear on all of the rest. LTs and TRs, I believe, are transports. AV would be like an auxiliary, and then XX, I think, is a submarine. But we'll go ahead and we'll just build our first class of ship. We're going to make it a battleship. We can even suggest a name. So, for example, it can give us the name Hastatosus, and we can choose where we want to build it. Now, this is going to be an important decision to make. I'm going to choose to build it in Great Britain because, as you can see here, our local yards in Japan have a 10,000 ton limit. So even though these are warships that we're choosing, we're choosing a ship design, and we can choose to start with some of these ships, we're still held in place by the different design limitations of the countries where they're built. And Japan historically did use Great Britain as a shipbuilder of choice for their larger warships. They had several cruisers built in Italy and France, but they had the majority, if not all of their battleships were built in Great Britain. So we'll go ahead and, interestingly enough, also a lot of the other non-great power, well, a lot of the other great powers still chose to build some of their ships overseas. For example, Russia had some of its battleships built in France. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose Great Britain because they have a 16,000 ton limit. We're going to change the class name here to Fuji because that was the first modern kind of pre-dreadnought class that the Japanese got. They did capture some Chinese battleships in the 1894 war that the Japanese fought against them, and at the time those battleships were fairly modern, but it was kind of in a transition period. You weren't yet to pre-dreadnought battleships yet at that time period, so you still had like Citadel battleships and whatnot that were actually built in Germany, and they were considered modern, but by 1900, with the Royal Sovereign class and the full introduction of the sort of stereotypical pre-dreadnought battleship, they quickly became obsolete. We're going to choose 13,000 tons for our displacement. The ship that we're going to loosely base our design on is going to be the Fuji class, which was launched in 1894 in Elswick and Poplar, England. So basically, the Thames Iron Works built the Fuji, and the Armstrong Whitworth shipbuilding company built the Yashima, which were both Japanese Fuji-class ships. They were both laid down in 1894 and completed by 1899. So the Japanese would have these warships by this time period. Again, we're going to loosely base our design on that. So the class, the Fuji class, had around a 12,500 ton displacement. Now, one thing I've noticed is the smaller battleships tend to weigh more in this game than they did in real life. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. The ship made 18 knots, so we'll leave that there. We'll leave the freeboard at normal. It might have had a low freeboard, actually. That's one ship design attribute that I've always been a little bit confused on. Low freeboard basically means the ship rides lower in the water. So things like casemates are easily submerged by low freeboards, which are kind of like almost like broadside type guns that are put in the side of the ship below the actual deck. And those types of weapons are more easily kind of underwater in rough seas, and the ship could be less effective with a low seaboard, but it does allow you to have a lower tonnage. So it's possible they were low freeboard ships, but I'm going to stick to normal. We're going to keep the range at medium. We might shorten it up to short. Battleships in this era generally had pretty limited range and limited legs. So as we move down here, you'll see there's a total horsepower and machinery weight. There's a cost and a weight to our hull fittings for our coal, I suppose. And then we get to engine priority, which we can choose to be speed, reliability, or normal. If we want to focus on the speed, it makes the ship more likely to suffer breakdowns. Reliability makes it less likely to suffer breakdowns, but increases the cost and weight. And normal is just kind of a happy medium. So we're going to stick with normal. We're going to have a fuel type of coal. We can't really have oil yet because we don't have any territories with oil. We're going to go ahead and choose our belt armor based loosely off what the Fuji class had. Historically, the belt armor was between 14 and 18 inches thick. That's probably going to be a bit heavy on a ship of this size, so we'll choose 13 inches of belt armor. The belt armor extended, I think we're just going to choose 2 inches. That's a good, well, we'll make it 2.5 because that's going to match the deck armor. The deck armor is going to be 2.5 inches as well. And then the deck extended, we'll say, we'll have an inch or maybe 2 inches. 2 inches of armor. It's not too heavy. Conning tower is, again, going to be based off the Fuji, which the Fuji had 14 inches on the conning tower. So we'll set that to 13. Again, just a little bit lighter because I know just my own personal first-hand experience that the ships can weigh a bit more in this game than they did in reality. The turrets were between 9 and 14 inches, so we'll set those to 9. And then the top of the turret we'll set to 2.5 to equal the deck armor. Again, a plunging shot from a heavy shell is going to knock out a turret in almost any case anyway. This is mainly to protect against medium shells or shrapnel. 2 inches tends to be a good amount to protect against those types of things. And then the secondary armor was between 2 and 6 inches in real life, so we'll set it to 3. So again, you can just kind of fiddle around with these numbers, look at historical ships to kind of get a good sense of how much you should, put in there and kind of fiddle around. You can change things around, and actually if you're feeling a little bit intimidated, there's an auto-design ship option where the computer will just auto-design the ship for you based on the yard and the type of ship you're going to build, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Armor scheme, generally just for heavy weapons, leave it at a sloped deck. For protected cruisers, light cruisers are forced to be protected. And flat deck on top of belt, I'm not quite sure what that is, but the instructions do give you a little bit of information. Mines and torpedo defense don't apply. We haven't developed the technology for that yet. And then accommodation, you can choose cramped and it will save you a little bit of weight, or you can choose normal. Now, this is important. Ideally, you normally want a normal accommodation ship because a cramped ship is more likely to suffer serious damage when it's hit by a shell. It also increases the likelihood that the crew will mutiny in certain wartime situations because it's less comfortable to be on the ship. Just keep in mind that cramped ships do save you a little bit of weight, and we may switch it over if we need to when we kind of put our guns on, when we see how much weight we have. You can see here at the moment, you can see that we have a total of 11,717 tons are already required just to build the armor scheme that we have and the engine setup that we have to have 18 knots and our freeboard and all of that. So right now we've got 1,700 tons to play with, which means I'm guessing we may have to change some of those schemes. Now we go up on the, one other thing, Colonial Service. You can click that on or off. That will influence how much tonnage you have to play with. Basically, it's just design. It's an idea of making a ship more amenable to being overseas for extended period of times. Doesn't really apply for our battleship here. On the top right here, you've got this window here where main guns are located. So we're going to choose 12-inch main guns. The quality is kind of set. We don't have multiple different gun types, so we can't really change that. So it's set to -1. But the caliber, that's 12, and that's in inches. Since we are building it in Britain, we could expand it up to 13. 14 is actually illegal for Britain because they don't have that technology developed yet. Or we could change it, to whatever we wanted it to be. But generally, battleships in this era tended to have between 9.5 and 12-inch caliber guns, and the Fuji class did mount 12-inch guns. So that's what we're going to do. Below this is where the turrets for your ship are located. So first of all, we can see here there's a ship graphic for our warship. We can put funnels and things in there like that, but I'm really bad at designing that. I don't even know how you do that. How do you do this? Anyway, you know what we could do? We could just click Auto Design Ship, and then we get a whole fancy ship design that's put in there. I'm really bad at the whole design ship thing. The only thing is then we have to change everything. So, it does mean we kind of have to go backwards and... Okay, I know it's illegal. Yes, I know. I know. Okay, delete turret. Okay, so we're just going to go back. We're going to change the speed down to 18. We're going to lower the displacement. We're going to set the displacement to 13.5. Range medium, still built in Great Britain. Normal freeboard, speed 18. Engine priority normal. Fuel type coal. Belt armor, we said we were going to set it to 13 inches. The belt extended will be set to 2. Now the reason, or 2.5, 2.5. Deck will be 2.5. Deck extended will be 2. Conning tower will be 9. Turrets, what was that? We set them to 9, I believe. Turret top 2.5. Secondaries we set to 4. Or no, I think we set them to 3. Yeah, we don't have as much. Well, we also do have secondary guns at this point. Okay, so I changed a few things, but basically this is still all pretty close to being in line with the Fuji class. The belt extended is kind of the armor over non-vital areas, kind of maybe at the extremes of the ship. Same for the deck extended areas that are not substantially needed to be defended, but you still want to defend somewhat. And we kept everything else mostly the same. There's a few differences because you can see this weight total here is a little bit different. But we're going to go ahead and add in our main caliber turret. Now in this, actually, let's go ahead and update the ship graphic. You can see here the ship shrinks, and our secondary guns, we don't want to have any yet. We're going to go through that in a second. Same for our torpedo tubes. So there you go. So you just kind of got a basic outline of a ship here. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll set our main calibers to 12. We'll add a turret. We'll add it as a forward. We'll have it as a double turret. And voila, there you've got a 12-inch turret here on the front. This graphic really doesn't matter as far as the ship's performance. It's strictly there kind of as a aesthetic. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add an aft turret. Now, you could have turrets in other places. So, for example, we could have building nation can build ships with maximum of 2 centerline turrets. Okay. So I guess we can't do that. Wait, oh, I have 3. That's why. So you can see here we could build 2 up in front, or we could, change where we wanted it. We could have it as a starboard. Well, actually, we don't have wing turrets. We could have it as a aft centerline. Okay, sorry. Anyway, you can see here you can put turrets in different places, but depending on the technology that you have, it limits what you can do. Traditionally in this time period, all you do is you have a forward and you have an aft. There was one exception to that really, and that was the German, the Brandenburg class, which actually had a third turret kind of on the center line and shot between the funnels. But that was the rarity. And in general, until the Dreadnought comes along, you have warships that are limited to 2 main turrets, fore and aft, and then secondaries littered throughout the ship. So that's what we have right now. You can see here we've already got an issue with our weight being too heavy for the armaments that we have in place. So I think what we'll do is we'll drop the belt armor down to 11, and we're still going to be a little bit short. I think we'll lower our belt extended down to 2. Conning tower maybe 8. And the conning tower, by the way, that's like the bridge, so that's important to protect. We'll drop the guns down to 8 as well. Yeah, okay. Other information that you know influences is how many rounds per gun. I like to set that to 150, although traditionally battleships didn't have a ton of armor or a ton of shells available. Obviously, the more shells you have, the more weight that takes up in your magazines here. You can see here actually by increasing that to 150, we pretty seriously reduced the amount of free weight that we had. And then you've got secondary guns as well. We'll leave that at 90 for the moment, and you have 2 fire control positions, so you could take one of those out. Doesn't really affect the ship graphic, but it does affect weight, not too substantially. And then you've got some gun data, which gives you just kind of general information about the guns and where they can penetrate. We're going to have secondary guns. They will be 6-inch guns. We'll have 10 of them. And I'm thinking in casemates. I think that's how it was. Maybe they had some turrets for those things. You can see here when we put them in casemates, they're kind of all along here. It does put us overweight. What if we put them in turrets? We could do that. We could put them all in single gun turrets. And then our tertiary guns, and actually I'm looking at a image of the Fuji, and it does kind of look like most of the secondaries are above the deck line. So I think they were actually in turrets, and single gun turrets. Our tertiary guns, which were 23 pounders, so I believe that'd probably be a 2 caliber, a 2-inch gun, 20 of them, and we'll put those in casemates. So you can see here we've got 20 third tier guns, 10 second tier guns and turrets, and then we've got 4 main guns in these 2 big turrets here on either side of the ship. We could delete the funnels too, because it was only a 2-funneled ship, so we'll delete that forward funnel. You can see that influences the ship design as well. Now we're about 700 tons overweight. We could just increase our displacement. Again, it's going to be a bit heavier than it was in real life, but I'm okay with that. We could also shorten it to a shortened range ship, which I don't really want to do, or we can make the ship a cramped design, which actually saves a fair amount of weight as well. The other thing is the heavier the tonnage is on the ship, the more expensive it is as well. So keeping ships a little bit smaller does help save you a bit in cost as well. You can see here we increased the size of the ship to 14,300 tons. It's a little bit over 1,000 tons over the historical weight, closer to about 1.5. We're going to rename that. It gave us an auto name when we went ahead and auto designed. We're going to rename it Fuji, and you can see here we've got our first ship loosely based off the historical Fuji design, and I think that's good. If you're unsure if your ship is ready to be done, you just click the check mark there, ship design. It says rate of fire for secondary guns reduced by 20% due to accurate firing and training elevation gear for secondary turrets. Okay, so basically means we haven't designed the technology yet to make those effective. I suppose we could put them in casemates. They don't look like they're in casemates though, but I don't want their rate of fire to be reduced. So what happens when we put them in casemates? How does that affect our weight? Actually saves us a little bit. And we can drop it by 100 tons and save us a little bit of cost. And if we do that, the only concern is that we have cramped accommodations, which we do. We could set them to normal, but then we'd be too heavy. So we'll set them to cramped. It'll just limit kind of the usefulness of the ship. It'll make it a more short-range ship, something that you don't want to have out and about in the high seas. But honestly, this era of naval combat, there were very few battleships that were designed for high seas voyages. The accommodations are not very ideal to begin with. So we'll go ahead and we'll keep it as a cramped ship. We can always improve upon that with future designs. This is just going to be our initial battleship design. We'll go ahead and save it. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. Save the Fuji design. There you go. We've got one Fuji. And we can actually go ahead and you can see they cost $48 million per ship. So they're kind of expensive. And they've got a $217,000 maintenance cost. So we'll go ahead and we'll build one. You can see here now we have one more ship. It's immediately in service because we're in that pre-game building initial ship phase. And then we'll go ahead and we'll actually build a second. The reason I'm building these separately rather than just numbering them is I want to individually name them. So I'll go ahead and name the second one the Yashima, which was the second Fuji-class battleship. And we'll go ahead and build that. So we've got 2 battleships built You can see here we've got some information on maintenance cost, guns, stationed or status, active fleet, crew quality, location, northeastern Asia, which if we go back to the map will be this area. And then the speed is 18 knots with average range. That's what it means, normal. Our tonnage, the name, the class, and there you go. You can also see that our total monthly balance has dropped a bit because of those maintenance costs, and our funds have dropped from 517 down to about $420 million. We're not done getting everything all set up yet, but for the moment anyway, I think we'll cut that video off here, just because this has been almost 40 minutes now, or maybe a little bit over 40 minutes now for our gameplay video. I hope that wasn't too boring to watch me kind of go through and design the ship. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip designing the cruisers and destroyers. I'm just going to kind of do that on my own outside of the video, and then I'll go ahead and the next video we'll jump into the actual gameplay, so you don't have to just watch me building ships the whole time. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.